So today we're going to be talking about human genome editing, which, as you can probably guess because you're a member of this class, there are a lot of ethical questions that come up with this practice. And so today we're going to go over a piece that was written by Barry Coller, who is on a panel of scientists and healthcare professionals and ethicists who are trying to determine a set of standards about what possible ethical practices we could utilize moving forward if we're going to take advantage of this technology. Because it is a really powerful technology, and it has the capacity to alter not only what we understand about what it means to be human, but also how our society is going to function in the future. And so the ramifications of this technology are far-ranging and very consequential. And so I think it would be a good topic to discuss, especially in an ethics class. So I'd like to start off by just giving you some general notes about this piece. And then we can kind of transition into a more discussion-based class today as we bring up some of the ethical problems or ethical questions that arise when we think about using this technology in various ways. So in this piece, Coller makes it clear that he and the other panelists that were involved in trying to answer the ethical questions surrounding this technology, what kind of standards that we can develop for appropriate use of human genome editing. So in this piece, he wants to describe what human genome editing is, the different kinds that there are, the pros and cons of human genome editing, and then again, what standards we can utilize to help determine what ethical human genome editing looks like. Now, this is a relatively new technology. As far as I can recall, the full human genome wasn't mapped until the last 20, 30 years. And so, of course, humans haven't really thought about whether or not we should develop this technology and what appropriate use of it looks like, because it wasn't really on our radar for that long. As I've kind of alluded to before, human genome editing has the potential to drastically alter our future as a species and our environment. So these are some of the consequences of human genome editing that we're going to be discussing today. Is that dark enough? Can you read that back there? Okay, good. So this is just kind of a broad overview of what we're going to be discussing today. But if we want to get a better handle on what human genome editing is and what potential uses of it might be ethical or unethical, we need to get straight on what the different kinds of genome editing are. There are basically two different kinds of genome editing. One of them is used fairly often today, or could be. The other is kind of still in the works, and we're still figuring out what the potential applications of this second form might be though we have some very interesting ideas about that. The first kind of genome editing that Coller touches on in this piece is what's known as somatic genome editing. This kind of genome editing edits the non-heritable genes of human DNA. So this kind of genome editing would go into a person, alter their genome in some way, but it doesn't alter those traits that are going to be passed on from one generation to the next. Somatic genome editing is normally used to treat and or prevent disease and disabilities. These are things like bone marrow transplants, organ transplants, etc. People generally don't have a problem with this kind of genome editing. People get organ transplants all the time. People get bone marrow transplants all the time. And people don't see a lot of ethical problems with this kind of genome editing. Normally because it's used to help rehabilitate humans in a certain way, to establish human functioning or the functioning of certain organs or of the human as a whole. It's normally used to treat and or prevent disease or disability. The kind of genome editing that we're going to be focusing on mainly today is called germline genome editing. This does edit the heritable genes of human DNA. And so any changes made to the host are going to be passed down to their offspring. This isn't done very much yet, but the reason why we should be discussing it in this class is because its applications are very wide, and its consequences might be very deep if we decided to engage in this practice further. Germline genome editing could be used to treat and or prevent disease and disability, but it could also be used for other means, like furthering human enhancement or furthering human capacities in various ways. Intelligence, other heritable traits, physicality, perhaps also other kinds of capacities, like potentially someday giving someone the ability or the capacity, the virtuosity of Mozart or Prince or someone else like that, if we can determine, where the genius of these different musicians comes from and if it is linked to genes in any way. So its applications are far-reaching. Germline genome editing can be used to modify the traits of certain people, eye color, hair characteristics, physicality in general. But the primary concern of ethicists thinking about this potential use of this technology has to do with the ways that it could be used to enhance humans' capabilities, their intelligence, their motor skills, their ability to perceive objects in their environment, and so on. The place that my brain goes to when I immediately think of this kind of use of technology is the creation of genetic super soldiers. People who have advanced stamina capacity, enhanced strength, enhanced speed. They can fight for longer. Applications like this are not that far out of reach, and they could be coming down the pipe very soon in the future. So not only could germline editing be used to treat and or prevent disease and disability, it can also be used to just enhance human functioning in various ways, which could have a wide range of consequences for how we organize our society and what it might be possible for us to do in the future. Does the distinction between these two different forms of genome editing make sense? Do you all feel like you have a good grasp on that? Okay. Now let's get into actually some of the perhaps ethical objections to this form of human genome editing, the germline form. Because it's this one that I think raises the most ethical problems, if you think about it. Can anybody think of any possible objections or remember any from the article? Even if this form of germline editing is used to treat and or prevent disease and disability, are there problems with that? Are there problems even posing that question or that application? Yeah.
Well, I feel like if this becomes popular, only rich people are going to be able to afford it. So if you have a terminal illness that can't be cured, but this could save you, it wouldn't save the average person, only the people who can afford to be saved.
Ah, okay. So there's worry about if this technology is developed, it might further inequality between social groups, right? Obviously, if this technology becomes something that we understand well and begin to start using, only the rich people are going to have access to it, right? Or the people who are embedded in certain networks, certain privileged social networks. We can kind of break down the objections to germline editing into two camps. First, we can talk about just objections to all forms of germline editing. But then we can talk about objections later about forms of germline editing not used to treat and or prevent disease and disability. But let's start with all forms of germline editing. As you mentioned earlier, this technology could be used to exacerbate, intentionally or unintentionally, social inequality and economic inequality, right? Let's come back to that objection now. What objections generally do people give of messing with human DNA? What's something that you normally hear religious people say about this technology? What's the phrase that's touted out? Yeah.
We shouldn't play God.
Right. That's the phrase that you hear a lot, right? People think that maybe using this kind of technology constitutes playing God, which maybe that is disrespectful to the divine. Maybe that is us engaging in something that is arrogant or prideful that we shouldn't be engaging in the first place. Something like that. You might also think that messing with human DNA also involves a certain disrespect to our DNA as being a product of our human heritage, right? If you have some sort of respect or admiration for our ancestors and what they did and who they were, going around and messing in people's DNA could constitute something like disrespect to the biological heritage that we're a part of. What else? What other objections might there be? Think about the people who are going to be affected by the use of this technology. Let's say a mother and a father want their child to have certain traits. Who does have a say in that, and who should have a say in that? Or let me use a concrete example to help make my point clear. If someone doesn't want to get surgery, should we force them to get surgery? If we want to give surgery to someone, but we don't inform them about what this surgery is actually going to be like and what it's going to do to them, is it appropriate to make them have the surgery? I'm seeing a lot of shaking of heads. This kind of genome editing involves implicitly disrespecting the informed consent of all of those who are affected by it, right? Whoever's going to be affected by editing human genes in the future, they have no say, right, in what's going to happen to them and how they're going to be affected. They can't be given informed consent. The child can't be given informed consent if the parents want to mess around with their DNA and make them have blue eyes or something, or brown hair, or whatever it is. Future generations and the children that are going to be the bearers of these traits don't have a say in the matter. Maybe that's an ethical issue, right? I'm abbreviating generations, gen here. Now, there are some people who have praised this technology because it's going to allow humans, can I write that down right? Yeah. Because it's going to allow us to rid the human race of disabilities and other things. Is that a problem? What might happen if we started using this technology? Socially. Think socially. There are people with disabilities who are being stigmatized right now, right? What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, like, it can be seen as, like, kind of ableist. Like, you have a whole community of, like, maybe deaf people that learn, like sign language. Like, what happens to that community if, like, we get rid of deafness?
Right. Right. It has actually been argued by some scholars within academia that the use of this technology could functionally end up producing deaf genocide, the destruction of the deaf community, because there will be no more deaf people anymore. The destruction of that culture, of that way of life, of that way of seeing the world. This kind of technology may produce increased stigmatization of those with disabilities. I like that the word that you use there, because that's a word that's often thrown around in the literature. A practice that would be that could be used to eliminate what we think of as disabilities in human society from our species could be seen as ableist, right? Should we do that? Is that even the right way to think about what we want humans to be like? Is it based on presumed standards of what, I don't know, human function should look like? What else? Can you think of any other objections? Let's say that this technology does become more widespread. There are parents who utilize it to produce designer babies, and there are those that don't. How are the parents who don't use this technology, how will they be treated?
I was going to say something different, but I feel like it's like assigning a material value to a child. Like, that's your object. You can design it however you want. Like, it feels like you're treating people as its instead of, like, people.
Right. That kind of goes back to this point, right? I mean, the child and the future generations who are going to be the bearers of these traits, they don't have a say in any of this stuff that happens to them. Right? The parents are making an intentional decision to mess with the DNA of their children and of future generations, because odds are, people are going to go on procreating. They're not just going to stop for some reason. So yeah, there is kind of like there is kind of an intervention there that we don't really regard as completely right, maybe. Right? But the parents who don't engage in using this technology, might they be stigmatized too? People are going to be pressuring them. For your next child, you have to make them 6'4". I'm telling you. Jamie was able to get a basketball scholarship because we messed with his DNA a little bit. You guys are being stupid. You're not looking out for your child in the best way that you could. What if you just gave them all these abilities, all these traits? You're setting them up for failure by not doing that. Right? You could see these kinds of conversations happening. Increased use of this technology might then result in increased stigmatization of parents who don't choose to use it. And of children who don't have these DNA modifications, right? You know how mean kids can be, right? Especially in middle school and high school and things. Has anybody watched the show Love, Death, and Robots? There's an episode in season 2 of that show where it imagines a future in which this kind of technology is being used widely. And does anybody know how the kids who don't have these traits are treated?
They feel useless.
They feel useless. They don't feel as strong or as capable as the other kids. The other kids make fun of them, right? Because they can't jump 12 feet in the air. Right? So we might have to worry about increased stigmatization of not only those with disabilities, but also those parents and children who aren't engaged with this technology, or aren't engaging with it. Are these good objections? Or are the people who are thinking up these things making a mountain out of a molehill? What do you think? You think any of these objections are right? Nobody here has a problem with messing with the DNA of people? Would you do this to your own kids? Yeah.
Yes.
You would. What kinds of things would you change if you could?
Height, ability to produce muscle, and hand size.
Hand size, good for sports, right? Other things maybe. So just like increasing stamina, musculature, height, that kind of stuff. Ability to engage in physical tasks would be better. Yeah.
I'd probably just do it to like remove disease or any like chance of disability occurring or something like that. I wouldn't really change their overall physical appearance or stuff like that. But if I could snuff out some diseases or like heart disease and stuff like that, I would.
Maybe heart disease or diabetes runs in your family, right? And you don't want to be the one to pass that on to your kids, that potential risk. Yeah.
Couldn't this possibly like get rid of the healthcare system if everyone started doing it? Like there would be no, if everyone was healthy and was genetically modified to like not get sick or like anything, what would you need scientists for to research how to cure cancer and all that stuff then?
Yeah, I mean, it would seem like the healthcare system would take a hit. I mean, people are still going to get hurt, right? And people are still going to eat unhealthily and do the things that are going to make them sick. But yeah, it would probably be downsized a bit. Is that a good thing? Yeah.
I'd probably only use it to like get rid of like diseases, like we said earlier, because I think like parents always say they would love you no matter what and who you are, but this kind of like in a better way. They're like, oh no, I would love you if you were 6 foot. I would love you better if you were blonde or what you know.
Yeah. Do you think all parents are going to be thinking like that? Maybe there are parents who are just trying to look out for what's best for their child. But you do see the possibility for abusing this, right? Or it being abused.
Like, where do you draw the line of preventing a disability whenever, like how we were saying with deaf people, like a lot of people think of it as a part of their identity, like where do you draw the line?
Right, yeah. Would it be good to eliminate deafness or muteness? Is that desirable? Should we be engaging in trying to eliminate that if we can? Or is that ableist or something else? What else do y'all think about this? Would you engage in this if you had the ability to? I see a lot of people saying that they would only use it kind of to treat and or prevent disease and disability. Is that how y'all generally feel? Or are there those here that wouldn't touch it at all? Like, nope, not messing with that. That's a slippery slope there.
I don't think I would touch anything, because what happens if something goes wrong? And you could be in a worse situation.
What do you think could go wrong?
But I don't know,
Become out radioactive or something? Yeah, I mean, there's no assurance that this is going to be a 100% success every time, right? We're getting better using the technology now, but there's still a lot that we have to learn about that. You might worry that on our way to figuring out how to use this technology better, there are going to be a lot of victims that are affected in various ways by bad DNA splicing using this CRISPR technology. These are just some objections generally to germline editing in itself. But we can also get more specific about why some people object to the use of this technology. These objections have to do with those forms of editing that are not used to treat and or prevent disease and disability. We've already heard one. The exacerbation of potential social inequalities, right? Inequalities between social groups. For those of you who are more progressively minded in this room, which group of people is probably going to have access to this technology first? Besides the wealthy people. Who generally? What social group?
The government.
Yeah, maybe the government. Think more basically than that, though. Who generally has the most amount of wealth in U.S. society, in Western society?
White people.
That's right. Can you imagine a future in which a bunch of middle class and upper middle class white people have access to this technology? They make their kids these, super strong, super fast, bigger hands, better musculature, and all of a sudden they're taking all of the socioeconomic opportunities away from other social groups because they compete better than them, right? They're stronger, faster, perhaps smarter. Maybe they need less sleep. Maybe they don't get as tired from doing the same work. This technology could result in furthering inequity between social groups, right? Is that desirable? Does that sound like a good thing? Or how about the children themselves who are affected by this? You kind of alluded to this point already. But what kind of culture or social mindset might we have as a society if this technology became more widespread and used more often? How might we start to view children? Yeah.
Like projects?
Right. Like projects or products. The use of this technology might result in a culture in which we see positively and engage in the commodification of children. Right? Not as living beings with their own ends and their own goals and their own autonomy that we ought to respect, but things that we can stick our hands into and make them how we want them to be. Right? If this technology did become more widespread, how might society respond to it? We kind of talked about it when we were looking at this point. The increased stigmatization of parents and children who don't engage with this technology. What kind of society might be formed if we started using this technology more? What might parents face socially as a result of the widespread use of this technology? Anybody? Yeah, you have an idea?
In general, like social persecution. Like if I could see that like cults could be formed around this. Like people that if like depending on what becomes normal, like there could be a cult that wholeheartedly supports designing your kids and another one that's like what we are today. Like
Right. Yeah, I mean, there might be social persecution that results from this. There could be certain social groups or cults that form around this technology. But even more basically, there would just be perhaps increased social pressure, right, of people to use this technology. Or you can think of this kind of also along race lines when it comes to social groups in society. You might have certain members of minority groups who see this technology as a way to get their social group out of their economic situation. Right? What would happen to other individuals in that social group, other parents who don't want to put their child through that? other members of their social group might be like, look, you have a social obligation to make your kids a certain way to get us out of this mess. You have an obligation to your community to make your kids as strong and fast and as smart as you can. If you don't do that, you're not really looking out for us. You're being white supremacist or something. Right? Now, we've also alluded to another objection already, but we don't fully understand this technology yet. We don't have a mastery of it, so what kinds of potential harms could result from it? What about the production of new DNA sequences that could have unforeseen dangers and risks to people? Monkeying around with the genome might end up resulting in the production of new DNA sequences, and we don't know what they're going to do, right? They may pose harm to the child. They may pose harm to more generations going on into the future. Who knows what kind of risks come with the production of new DNA sequences, intervening in our natural corporeal form. Going along with this is the potential risk of multi-generational harm. We start modifying the genomes of babies. We're not entirely sure what that's going to end up doing, but we have a pretty good idea. We're like, oh, maybe this will increase their intelligence. Maybe this will make them have more stamina, all these things. But it ends up creating a new disease that we haven't had to deal with before. A disease which then gets heritably passed down from generation to generation, right? Or maybe these kinds of genome editing might increase the risk for diseases that we already know about. Maybe it might shorten human lifespan. We do not have complete knowledge or mastery over the human body at all. So there are unforeseen risks here, risks that we can't even conceptualize yet, because we don't know what engaging in this technology is going to do, right? We haven't ran that experiment yet. What about if we think globally, or if we think nationally and internationally? What could this technology do? I've kind of mentioned it once before. This technology could be used to create something like super soldiers, right? How might that threaten the United States? Yeah.
Maybe some dangerous people living amongst us.
Living amongst us, or, if countries start engaging in their own experimentation programs around genome editing, all of a sudden, World War III breaks out and we have to fight super soldiers. There's a real risk to national security here, right? If we as a species start going down this path, right? Were you going to say something? We don't get along with everyone globally, do we? There are certain countries and nations that we're allied with and other ones that we are not allied with. What if our political enemies started using this technology? We rebut all of the ethical objections to it, and we as a people decide, we're going to engage in this technology. It becomes socially and ethically acceptable. Now, all of a sudden, we might have to worry about fighting an enemy that we cannot defeat in the future. Right? That's kind of scary to think about. Another thing that we've kind of already mentioned, we can bring up again here, which has to do with people who are deaf or mute or have some other thing that society considers a disability. What word comes to mind when you think about that stuff? When you think about trying to produce certain children without disabilities. What E word? It was very popular in science not too long ago. Does the word eugenics ring a bell? Eugenics programs? You might worry that this technology could increase risk for abuse in eugenics programs, right? Well, first of all, what is eugenics? What does that concern? Think Nietzsche, what we talked about when we discussed Nietzsche's ethical views. The Nazis were engaged in eugenics programs, right? American scientists have advocated for them in the past. What does that involve? Yeah.
To like optimize, like producing better like humans.
Right, exactly. I like you use the word optimize. Yeah. Trying to optimize humanity moving forward by producing only the best kids, the smartest kids, the strongest kids, the fastest kids, whatever it is. The kids with the best musical talent or talents when it comes to art. Do we want to start messing around with that? Might think it's a little unsavory, right? To try to be producing the best kids. Again, the word ableism comes to mind. But also there's risk for abuse in trying to make that happen, right? Who knows what kind of risks we're opening ourselves up to, not only by engaging with this technology, but also by producing kids with certain traits who can't consent to that and kind of constructing certain lives for them that might not be beneficial to them. Anything else? Can you think of any other objections? It's kind of related to national security. But how could these genetic enhancements be used by people who are maybe more unlawfully minded? This technology would have obvious applications for criminals, right? People who want to steal things, people who want to destroy things, whatever it is, right? There's a potential risk here that if we start using this technology the people who aren't so happy about society might use it for their ends, right? All of a sudden, maybe, stealing money from banks becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot harder to track these people down and to capture them, right? Now, maybe you have a problem with banks and the financial system and all that, but you see what I'm getting at, right? This kind of technology has risks for abuse in criminal applications. Whatever you can imagine that might be. Assassinations, right? Maybe we'll have to worry about assassin super soldiers in the future. Engaging with this technology might not only increase crime, but it might make crime worse because of the newfound capacities that these individuals might have. It might allow them to reap more destruction than is already occurring in society. More murders, more deaths, more thefts, all that kind of stuff. So what do y'all think about this technology? There are definite ethical questions that arise from thinking about it, but it could also be used for good, right? Think about the things humanity could accomplish if we all did have super speed and super strength. Can we even imagine that?
I think the bad outweighs the good, though, in this situation, especially even though you bring up like the super speed or whatever. Not everyone would have like access to the technology, so it wouldn't be fair anyway.
Okay, so you think the bad outweighs the good? Maybe we shouldn't start using this?
I feel like it could potentially create a new form of like what we consider to be like a disability, because
say more.
like if someone didn't have access to the technology and they're normal or like not disabled, and everyone else is, more like their abilities are heightened, then society would adapt to that, creating the non-edited people, like it would make them disabled.
Yeah, maybe that's something to worry about, right? If this technology becomes really widespread, in the minds of a lot of people maybe, the non-edited people would be seen as having a disability because they're not genetically enhanced, right? They can't jump 12 feet in the air. They can't run for 3 days without tiring. But does the bad actually outweigh the good here? Can anybody think of positive applications for this technology? We've talked about one, right? It can be used to treat and or prevent disease and disability. That could be helpful to a lot of people. Maybe if we figure out and isolate the gene that increases risk for alcoholism, for drug addiction, we could get rid of that risk for people, that genetic risk. We could get rid of the genetic risk that might cause people to be more at risk for heart disease, diabetes, cancer, whatever it is. Isn't that good? We don't want people suffering from those things, do we? Or think about how much we could get done if people have these abilities and the things that we could accomplish. With these abilities, that might allow us to develop new forms of media, new forms of art, new forms of technology, new forms of architecture. Maybe our buildings could be different, could look different. Isn't that kind of enchanting? I mean, maybe we could accomplish so much that we can't even imagine how far we could go as a species if we actually engaged with this. Isn't that something to be excited about? Or are y'all more worried than excited? Raise your hand. Who's more worried than excited? Why are y'all so worried? Which one of these objections seems like the strongest one to you? Or which one do you think, like, yeah, that's it. We can't do it because of that? Yeah.
I think the commodification of children would be like the best argument because like if I was a child that was genetically modified, and I knew that, I would think to myself like, oh, I wasn't good enough for my parents, naturally how I was made.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe use of this technology will cause some sort of trauma or crisis in children when they learn that they're edited or something. Maybe it'll affect their relationships with their parents. Maybe it'll affect their relationships with society. They'll be like, man, screw this society that normalized this. This is garbage. I don't want to be a part of this. This sucks.
I just don't think people can be trusted to like use it in like in a safe way. I feel like people are just gonna start like making whatever they see like as cool or like top notch or something. Like they'll go crazy with it.
So you're a little pessimistic, or maybe we'll say realistic about human nature.
Yeah.
You're like, look, this has a lot of potential benefits, but I know people, and people suck. Yeah?
Yeah. Like I think I would even at some point go crazy if something were to happen. Like just realistic with it.
It's an interesting point. Yeah.
I feel like there'd be more human trafficking because, like, if these people are genetically better, then who's to say they don't have more value in, like, the worst way?
That brought up an interesting idea. What if people start messing with the size and shape of people's genitalia? And human trafficking increases. Is that a potential consequence of this? Was that even on your radar? It's kind of messed up, right? We don't want that. There are lots of potential risks and consequences that are downstream from normalizing and engaging in this kind of technology. Can we draw a line somewhere, or should we just not go down this path at all? Is there a slippery slope here? If we start engaging in it, well, we inevitably just continue down the path. Yeah.
I think if this actually started, there'd have to be some sort of like regulations. Like there would have to be like you can't go crazy. Like you can't do this, that, and the third. Like there should be like a set thing, like amount that you could do.
Like legal regulations?
Or like you'd have to get it like approved or like something like that. It'd probably be like quite a process to do something like this. But
yeah. I mean, based on our rate of technological advancement, though, it might become possible in the future to do it relatively easily and quickly and cheaply, right? So yeah, maybe regulations are a good idea. What else might we want to put in place to prevent some of this bad stuff from happening? Requirements, regulations, standards, if we don't want to go down this path.
And I feel like there's going to be a way around it. Like, no matter what, someone's going to find a way to abuse this, so we're better off without it.
So are you saying if we walk down this path more than we already have, like inevitably we're going to end up with these problems maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you advocating then for, let's just not touch this at all?
Yeah.
Anybody else feel that way? What about the whole preventing of disease thing? That sounds pretty great, doesn't it? Maybe we can go that far with it? In any case, Coller and the other people on this panel who met to discuss these issues do lay out some regulations and some ethical frameworks and standards for discussing and possibly implementing this kind of technology in the future. Y'all want to hear what those are? It's quite a list, but they're trying to be as thorough as possible because they see these issues on the horizon, and while they recognize the power of this technology and what it might allow us to do, they also see all of these issues, these potential issues that we have been discussing up until this point. So near the end of this article, they offer some recommendations surrounding this form of human genome editing. He says in this article, clinical trials using heritable genome editing may be permitted only within a robust and effective regulatory framework that includes the following conditions. One of them being the absence of reasonable alternatives. We should not engage in this technology if there are reasonable alternatives that we can employ that don't involve actually messing with the DNA of people and altering the DNA of future generations. Instead of getting rid of someone's diabetes by messing with their DNA, there might be a reasonable alternative there. Maybe there is medical treatment, less invasive medical treatment, maybe there's drug treatment, maybe there are lifestyle choices that the person could engage in that would help them with this issue, that don't have such far-reaching consequences. They also suggest that this kind of technology should only be used to prevent a serious disease or condition. Restricting the technology to that aim, to that end. Should be two. So I don't know, what counts as a serious disease or condition?
Well, if a woman is pregnant and she has AIDS, that kid is going to have AIDS too.
So that maybe that'll count as a serious disease or condition?
Yeah, I feel like if you can prevent it in the child, that's probably, there's no cure for that.
Should we engage in using this technology if someone has a risk for addiction? Just a higher risk than a normal person. Does that count as a serious disease or condition? I see some shaking of heads. Maybe that wouldn't rise to the same level as AIDS, because there are certain lifestyle choices that the person could engage in that would insulate them from the dangers of addiction, right? They also say that not only should we restrict this technology to preventing serious disease or condition, but also to restricting editing only those genes that have been convincingly demonstrated to cause or to strongly predispose to that disease or condition. So no just messing around with any DNA that you want, not just causing children to have traits willy-nilly, but only specifically targeting those genes that are associated with the serious disease or condition in question. What do you all think about that? Or do you want to be able to have a say over your child's eye color and height? Is that so bad? I don't know. What else do you think we should have in place before we start engaging with this technology? Should we just start doing it willy-nilly? Or should we set up some sort of structure or engage in some sort of clinical trials and experimentation to determine the risks and the benefits of this technology? Coller and his team obviously think the latter, right? They say we shouldn't engage in this technology unless we have the availability of credible preclinical and or clinical data on risks and potential health benefits of the procedures. We shouldn't just roll this out to the general population unless we do some clinical and preclinical trials first, right? Unless we have a better handle on what this is actually going to do to people. Of course, going along with this, they also say ongoing rigorous oversight during the clinical trials of the effects of the procedure on the health and safety of research participants. So no, rogue corporations engaging in this kind of experimentation, but rigorous ongoing oversight of those trials involved in collecting this data. What's another thing that we might want to have in place before we start doing this? Do you think patients should be notified if the doctor is going to mess with their DNA? Yes or no? Yes? Seems like a pretty easy question to answer, right? Not only should there be informed consent from the people who are involved in undergoing procedures like this, but there should be maximum transparency by those who are involved in performing these procedures. That's consistent also with patient privacy. Maybe we all don't want to tell everybody, that Jim just got his genome edited. Because that would also fall under healthcare law, right? Should we use this technology on a child or children and then never talk to them again or their children? Yeah? Maybe. Anybody else like that idea? Coller and his team obviously don't think so. They say comprehensive plans need to be in place for long-term, multi-generational follow-up that still respect personal autonomy. Evaluations of how these procedures are affecting generations on into the future. And he says that these long-term plans should still respect patient autonomy. You know, maybe if someone down the line doesn't want to come in and have their whole genome sequence mapped out, maybe we should respect the personal autonomy of those people. Especially maybe if they're not planning on having any children. Then, these genes end with them. We don't tie someone up and cart them off to a medical institution to have their genome mapped involuntarily. Maybe that would be bad. How about oversight mechanisms? Oversight mechanisms which prevent extension to uses other than preventing serious disease or condition. Maybe we need to have some sort of regulatory or oversight body that's keeping track of what all of these institutions are doing to make sure that they're not making superhuman babies or designer babies. Maybe that would be a good idea. How does all of this sound? Do you like all of these points? Is there anything missing? Or perhaps you fundamentally disagree with the idea that we should be worrying about this at all. What do you think? What if somebody doesn't plan on having any children? And they're like, nope, I'm never going to have any kids. Let me experiment on my own DNA as much as I want. What's wrong with that? Look, maybe I want to be super fast and super strong. I promise I won't use it for evil purposes. Why can't I do that? Or, closely related with genome editing is the issue of cybernetics. It's going to be possible for us in the future to augment our own body with mechanical, machine, and computer parts. Y'all have heard of Neuralink, right? This thing that Elon Musk is trying to make, a computer chip that goes into your brain that will allow you to access the internet mentally. Why can't I do that to myself? What's wrong with that? Wouldn't that be cool? Or maybe, I'm just sick of this left arm. I want this replaced with a robotic, strong, cybernetic arm that I can crush tables with. That would be cool. Why not? If we imagine those uses of this technology which aren't going to be passed down to future generations because people decide not to have kids, what's so bad with it? A lot of y'all seem to be worried about the children primarily and the future harms, right? But why can't we just do whatever we want to ourselves? People can't be trusted. Okay. You want to say more about that?
You just can't trust people to do that, even if it's to yourself. Like, if you did that, you got your bionic arm and you were smashing tables, what you can go and kill people. Like, if you can smash a table, like, you can just do whatever you want. Like, you can't trust people.
I mean, if I'm going to kill someone, I could find another way to do that, though, right? I wouldn't need a bionic arm.
Now it's just a little bit easier.
It would be easier. That's true. Maybe it would be easier to break into an armored car. Just punch through the door, rip it out. So, if we did start to use this technology and people can't be trusted, how do we feel about making police super soldiers to combat all of the criminal super soldiers? He scoffed at that. Why?
Because no, we already have a big enough issue with the police as it is now, and giving them superpowers, I don't trust that.
Yeah, well, nothing like teleportation or flying, but
no, they don't need an enhancement already.
Okay.
No.
They're militarized enough already, you're saying?
Yeah, I just feel like that'd be making it worse.
Okay. Does anybody want to do this to themselves? There are people who are working on this right now. There's a documentary on Netflix that was about this. People who are trying to modify their own DNA, actually injecting chemicals into themselves. Anybody want to try it? No? What if you were like bioluminescent, you glowed in the dark? Wouldn't that be cool? There's a guy in the documentary, I think, who's working on transferring the trait of bioluminescence to other animals other than just sea creatures and things.
That doesn't make any sense because bioluminescence is specifically like a it's not even a self-defense technique. Like stuff in the ocean lights up when it gets disturbed so that stuff comes to eat the thing that's trying to eat whatever's bioluminescent. So like what in the world what are you going to do with a glowing rabbit?
It would be cool.
Yeah, for like 10 seconds.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you're just really in love with bioluminescence. I don't know. Is there nobody here that thinks this is a good idea? There's got to be some of you out there who think that people are naturally good, right? Naturally cooperative. Why are we so worried about this being abused? Yeah.
Like, I think there's always just going to be one bad egg. That's all it takes to ruin the entire thing. So, like, say there's a doctor that knows how to do this, and he says, oh, if you give me, like, $1 million, I'll, genetically modify your child, even though it's illegal. Like, they're just looking to make a profit off of people. Like, it's just always going to be about the money and the personal gain for people.
Okay. There any other comments that y'all can think of? Y'all seem really worried about this.
I just think people are kind of greedy, and once they have access to this, they're going to try to use it more and more and more.
That may be the case. But look, maybe that helps humanity out. Like, I mean, if more people use this for good rather than bad, think of the things we could accomplish. Think of the stuff we could build, the stuff that we could create. Think about the potential uses this might have for lifting people out of socioeconomic disadvantage.
I mean, yeah, but there's always someone that's going to use it for a bad reason. No matter how many good things that can be brought out of it, there's always going to be a negative.
Maybe. Anyway, this is an important issue to think about because it's probably a decision that you're going to have to make when you get older about whether or not to alter your child's DNA in any way. So you better get clear on what it is that you believe in because you will be faced with this decision, maybe. All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming, everybody.